But the bigger point, Ali, is that when Massey and I, when we passed the bill, 427 to 1 in the House, 100 to 0 in the Senate, the president signed it. You can't just ignore the law. It's obstruction of justice. It can be criminally prosecuted, if not by this administration, then a future administration. So there is a lot of outrage, not just with survivors, but with Republicans at what is happening with the selective Epstein disclosure.
Dan Bongino just left his job a few days ago, and he's already admitting what we've known all along, that the Republican Party is full of pedos. What is so great to watch about this MAGA civil war isn't just the fact that these infighting spats are so hilarious and just get so ugly, but they continue on after Republicans leave. Marjorie Taylor Greene isn't resigning from Congress to be quiet. She's only going to be louder than ever before. And it seems like it's the same thing from Dan Bongino, who immediately got into a fight with one of Donald Trump's biggest allies and exposed the crimes that we've known about for so long. We are going to get into it all. But before we do, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video, and if you haven't already, and you enjoy our channel, to hit that subscribe button, because it goes a long way in supporting our work. Now, if you don't know already, Dan Bongino recently resigned and left his job as the deputy director of the FBI. And of course, he was tied up in so much of the Epstein cover-up, which is why we need to hear from Rokana before we get into the news that Dan Bongino broke as he went to war with MAGA.
Would make Pam Bondi personally liable for $5,000 to $10,000 a day for every day that she does not release the files and comply. And it just requires a simple majority in the House. But the bigger point, Ali, is that when Massey and I, when we passed the bill, 427 to 1 in the House, 100 to 0 in the Senate, the president signed it. You can't just ignore the law. It's obstruction of justice. It can be criminally prosecuted, if not by this administration, then a future administration. So there is a lot of outrage, not just with survivors, but with Republicans at what is happening with the selective Epstein disclosure. And when we get back, we're going to push for full transparency.
What do you think motivates them? 427 to 1 in the House, 100 to nothing in the Senate. Remarkable frustration. I mean, we're using Marjorie Taylor Greene as an example, but she's just one example. There are lots and lots and lots of Republicans, as you predicted there would be, who are saying to themselves, I can't hold off against this tidal wave with my constituents. What's going on here?
Well, they're protecting the Epstein class. I mean, the president says it out loud. He says this is going to hurt a lot of people. This is going to hurt a lot of people who he knew, prominent bankers, prominent lawyers, prominent politicians, many of them in New York. And while the survivors haven't given me specific names, they've described the type of people in these files. Then people come on and say, well, are Khanna and Massey exaggerating? There's one way to find out. Just release the files. Release them. But that's what's going on here, is they want to protect the reputation of these rich and powerful men who showed up in Epstein's rape island and not have them take accountability.
Some remarkable reporting from the Wall Street Journal tonight, in which it says the club, meaning Mar-a-Lago, was also sending spa employees, usually young women, to Epstein's nearby mansion for massages, manicures, and other spa services, according to former Mar-a-Lago and Epstein employees. The house calls went on for years, even as spa employees warned each other about Epstein, who was known among staff for being sexually suggestive and exposing himself during the appointments, according to the former Mar-a-Lago employees. So this continues to be, I mean, obviously in these releases of files, we see photographs of Mar-a-Lago. This continues to be an issue, the ties between Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. I haven't seen anything that suggests culpability on Donald Trump's part, but there's a whole lot of pushback and secrecy going on.
There is, and I haven't seen anything that suggests any culpability, but there's obviously evidence that there was a tie between Mar-a-Lago, a place that Trump reveres as his home, as his headquarters, and Epstein. And those documents need to come out. I mean, the Wall Street Journal reporting is just scratching the surface.
Rokana has not only been instrumental in getting the ball rolling and making sure we are bringing enough attention to the Epstein cover-up, and I will always commend him for that. But then he kept going, and he's telling Pam Bondi, there will be accountability. It is the only thing that MAGA responds to. I think that we need to keep that in mind, that they understand accountability and they understand attention. Fundamentally, these people are broken, they are sad, they are socially awkward, and they are largely unliked in their lives. That is true of these MAGA politicians, of these MAGA figures. It is why they so need attention all the time. Donald Trump is a broken person. He is a broken personality. And that is what is very true of a Kash Patel or a Pete Hegseth, a Pam Bondi. Why do you think they're always on Fox, always doing podcast? Sure, it's because they need the MAGA media wheel to keep on turning. But they're desperate for that attention. Which is why, as soon as he left the FBI, Dan Bongino, a career podcaster, decided to get himself back in the mix with a fight with one of Donald Trump's biggest supporters and a known pedo. MAGA rejects wage blistering attack on each other. You've always been a dick. Things got messy between two far-right-wing figures whose time in the Trump administration was short-lived. Recently resigned Deputy FBI Director Dan Bongino and Matt Gaetz, the disgraced ex-lawmaker whose U.S. Attorney General nomination by Donald Trump was withdrawn amid a scandal after the 2024 election, exchanged insults on Tuesday morning. Gaetz, 43, fired the first shot after Bongino re-emerged on social media for the first time since leaving the FBI. The former congressman tagged the AI bot Grok on a Twitter post and asked, when did Dan Bongino run for office? And how did he perform as a candidate? Grok answered with details about Bongino's trio of failed congressional runs, twice in Maryland and once in Florida. That clearly struck a nerve with the 51-year-old former Secret Service agent, who fired back at Gaetz 2 hours later. Maybe if I spent more time at shady parties with moneyed insiders, I would have won, he wrote. I heard you'd know a bit about that. You've always been a dick, by the way, grifting off your daddy like a suckling little doggy. When I first met you in the Panhandle, I knew you were a piece of shit. It's written all over your phony face. Ouch. Bongino's post quickly racked up more than 10,000 likes, while Gaetz's question received about 1,000 by the early afternoon. Just a lot of weirdness from two people. Again, desperate, so desperate for attention. But Dan Bongino is right. I don't like to say that, and I won't be saying it often. So, don't expect that. But Matt Gaetz is a sleazeball, and he is a criminal. And it's why he left Congress, and it's why even Donald Trump couldn't get him in his administration. Which is crazy. That there is a bar low enough, considering Pete Hegseth exists, and Pam Bondi exists, and Kash Patel exists. And I'll say once again, Pete Hegseth, don't forget about RFK Jr. That there was a bar too low for MAGA Republicans. And honestly, it's just because they hate Matt Gaetz. He's that unpleasant of a person. And there are lots of people who are really unpleasant in Congress. I can promise you that much. But what Dan Bongino and in Matt Gaetz, this exchange shows, is that the dividing line within MAGA right now is viewed as this institution versus anti-institution kind of dilemma, kind of squabble happening right now. And those who view themselves as anti-institution are going after Donald Trump. Donald Trump, who spent his time with other wealthy billionaires, who's the man who owns a gold toilet, who's a billionaire himself, who ripped off working people, spent time with Jeffrey Epstein, was around all these politicians. Somehow, he was able to frame himself as an outsider. And what you will see, as the real demarcator of when the MAGA civil war really began, is when Donald Trump started to lose that gleam, started to lose that sparkle, when it became Marjorie Taylor Greene saying that Donald Trump doesn't really represent the interest of MAGA, and he's not really America first. When Thomas Massie or Rand Paul said that these tariffs were not accomplishing anything for working people, but were instead a tool for Donald Trump to play the stock market for his wealthy buddies, and of course, to give them carve-outs to make sure everything was fine for the billionaires. Donald Trump is now being criticized for being too cozy with the people. By the way, he was always closest with, but when the examples like Miriam Adelson, an Israeli billionaire, Israeli-American billionaire, I don't really know how much you can give her. The American part, considering she's a radical Zionist who wants Donald Trump to, level Gaza completely and displace the Palestinian people, and ethnic cleansing that pretty much every Republican would sign off on. It seems like at this point, So, I don't know how they can talk about how pro-child or pro-life they are when they're totally fine with that. But when Miriam Adelson tells Donald Trump, how about you run for an illegal third term to continue to give Netanyahu whatever he wants? I'll give you $250 million to push the interest of a foreign country. Yeah, I see why Republicans are starting to question if Donald Trump is really America first. And let's be honest, he never was. But he was always able to keep up the anti-institution, right? He was always able to keep up the anti-institution brand. And it was largely because there were Republicans like a Mitt Romney, and Adam Kinzinger, a Liz Cheney, who represented that more conventional view in the Republican Party. But Donald Trump rooted all of them out. And although he did that to maybe have more power, really, it stripped him of his power. Because in doing so, Donald Trump hasn't given anyone to he can fight within his own party. Donald Trump is the end all be all, and he always was. But Republicans, as we know, don't really like to govern. So if you're going to be a Republican in charge, you need a Republican to be stymieing you. It can't be you. Because we know Republicans don't actually want to govern. They don't want to get stuff done. They don't want to accomplish goals. This is a party that fundamentally exists to put roadblocks in the front of progressive agenda, the progressive agenda that's what they want to do, or they want to stop us. They don't have any plans. They want to strip right for Donald Trump and Matt Gaetz is in front of children. That's a bad joke. Dan Bongino is going to go back to podcasting and pushing conspiracy theories with no accountability, which Republicans hate. By the way, they hate accountability. And he's going to be the guy on the outside. Dan Bongino guy on the outside. I'm not going to let them hold me down. And it'll be a lie, right? It is a lie. It's a fundamental lie. But these people believe in anything, because they don't. So don't let them get you to believe that. But it is interesting that Dan Bongino going after Matt Gaetz. This is just kind of the theme of this administration right now. The MAGA civil war continues to be persistent. And people leave Donald Trump's administration to go cosplay as the real fighters for MAGA. But there are no real fighters in MAGA. If you come away from this video with anything, I wanted it to be that there are no real fighters within MAGA. But there are a bunch of sex criminals like Matt Gaetz and Donald Trump. So how much were you really protecting them? Dan, why did you have to leave the Trump administration? Let's ask that question. Was it because of the Epstein cover-up? I think so. And why did he want to leave? Because the money wasn't working anymore. If Dan Bongino stayed any longer, and he got more of that Epstein stink on him, I got some breaking news over there. Keep on fighting, y'all. Don't let them silence you, and until next time, I'll see you soon.